Part 1, Dramatic Hook, 250 words. At 0802 hours on December 7, 1941, Japanese pilot Lieutenant Commander Shigeharu Murata banked his Nakajima B-5N torpedo bomber over Pearl Harbor and spotted what he called an easy target below a single American battleship, USS Nevada, BB-36, moving slowly through a column of smoke and flame. Japanese aviators, 183 aircraft strong, had dismissed Nevada as a lumbering relic, the only battleship attempting to escape amid the chaos. They believed it would be a quick kill. But numbers told a different story. USS Nevada, Pennsylvania class, displacing 27,500 tons, with a crew of 1,500, sustained at least one direct hit from a Type 91 aerial torpedo and over 6 250-kilogram bombs in rapid succession. Fires broke out on multiple decks. Over 60 sailors were killed or fatally wounded in the first minutes. The ship's forward magazines flooded, and propulsion was compromised. Yet, as burning oil covered the water and debris rained from the sky, Nevada's crew refused to abandon their posts. Damage control teams, led by Chief Bosun Edwin Hill, fought flooding in 5 separate compartments. Gun crews, some operating 5-inch/51 caliber secondary batteries, returned fire even as explosions rocked the ship. Slowly, against enemy expectations, Nevada continued forward, engines still turning. Japanese pilots, who had laughed at the battleship's sluggish movement, now circled in disbelief. Instead of sinking and blocking the harbor entrance, Nevada absorbed the onslaught and kept moving, a defiance that would force Japanese commanders to reassess their target priorities in real time. Part 2, Historical Setup, 350 words. At 0755 hours on December 7, 1941, the first wave of Japanese aircraft began their attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet anchored at Pearl Harbor, territory of Hawaii. The Nevada-class battleship USS Nevada, BB-36, was moored alone at the forward end of Battleship Row, just off Ford Island. Commanding the ship that morning was Lieutenant Commander Francis J. Thomas, while Chief Bosun Edwin Hill directed damage control and deck operations. The Japanese attack force, designated the 1st Air Fleet, included the Kaga and Akagi carrier air groups. Their mission was clear: destroy the American battleships at anchor. Nevada, built in 1912 and modernized in the 1930s, displaced 27,500 tons, measured 583 feet in length, and carried 10 14-inch/45 caliber main guns. Its maximum speed of 20.5 knots was no match for Japanese aircraft, including Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters, Nakajima B-5N bombers, and Aichi D-3A dive bombers. At 0803 hours, a Type 91 aerial torpedo, dropped from less than 100 meters altitude, struck Nevada on the port bow near frame 41, tearing a 30 by 40-foot hole below the waterline. Shortly afterward, 3 to 5 250-kilogram general-purpose bombs, each capable of penetrating up to 6 inches of armor, hit the forecastle and superstructure. Fires erupted in the forward half of the ship, threatening the magazines. Despite the damage, Nevada's crew initiated counter-flooding to correct a 4-degree list to port. Watertight doors were sealed, and engine room personnel maintained steam pressure in 2 of the ship's turbines. At approximately 0810 hours, Nevada's engines engaged. Under heavy fire, the battleship began moving astern, then forward, away from its mooring. On shore, Rear Admiral William S. Spy of Battleship Division 2 watched as 183 enemy aircraft targeted the heart of the Pacific Fleet. Nevada, the only battleship underway, became a rallying point for anti-aircraft gunners along the waterfront. By 0830 hours, the ship's crew had manned every available 5-inch and .50 caliber anti-aircraft gun, returning fire against incoming bombers. Part 3, Rising Tension, 300 words. 0755 hours, the first warning sirens echoed over Pearl Harbor as Japanese aircraft dived on Battleship Row. Lieutenant Commander Francis J. Thomas sounded general quarters aboard Nevada. Crews raced to their stations, sealing hatches and manning guns. 0803 hours, Nevada was struck by a Type 91 torpedo forward of Turret 1. Chief Bosun Edwin Hill led a team to cut the mooring lines as flooding began in compartments A3 and A7. In the engine room, machinist's mate First Class John Joseph kept turbines operational despite rising water. 0810 hours, Nevada's turbines engaged, and the ship began moving slowly into the channel. On Ford Island, Commander Logan Ramsey of the Pacific Fleet Staff observed Nevada's movement and radioed, "Battleship underway, under own power." Japanese pilots in the second wave, including Lieutenant Saburo Shindo, identified Nevada as a priority target. 0815 hours, dive bombers commenced a concentrated attack. 3 bombs struck near the bridge and main deck, igniting fires in the galley and mess spaces. On the East Lock, Rear Admiral Patrick N. Elt Bellinger of Patrol Wing 2 ordered all available anti-aircraft fire to support Nevada's escape attempt. 0820 hours, Nevada, now trailing thick smoke, approached the harbor entrance. Japanese pilots attempted to sink her in the channel, risking blockage of the entire fleet's only exit. Nevada's crew, including fireman Second Class George Platt in the port engine room, continued damage control, shoring up bulkheads and fighting spreading fires. By 0835 hours, Nevada had survived at least 6 bomb hits and 1 torpedo, suffered over 60 casualties, and remained afloat. The battleship's battered hull, still moving, defied expectations on both sides. Japanese aircrews, initially mocking, now reported, "Target still moving. Impossible to sink." The battle for Nevada's survival had only just begun. In the hours following the attack, a stunned silence settled over Pearl Harbor. Fireboats and yard craft swarmed around the wounded Nevada, now beached on Hospital Point to prevent her from blocking the vital channel. The acrid smell of burning fuel hung in the air as rescue teams, including Navy nurses like Lieutenant and Purvis, waded through waist-deep water and debris to reach survivors. On shore, medical staff at the newly established emergency triage centers worked without pause, improvising with what supplies they could salvage. Shipfitters and welders from the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, led by Foreman Joseph K. Tausig Jr., organized immediate patching of Nevada's gaping wounds, determined to keep the ship from foundering. By December 8, as news of Nevada's ordeal circulated, morale among the surviving crew soared. Telegrams poured in from families, desperate for word, while naval censors carefully monitored outgoing correspondence for operational security. In distant Washington, D.C., Rear Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, recently appointed Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Fleet, reviewed after-action reports. He noted with interest the resilience of Nevada's propulsion and the discipline of her damage control teams, a testament, he believed, to the ship's training and leadership. Elsewhere in the Pacific, Japanese naval headquarters analyzed reconnaissance photos taken during the attack. Intelligence Officer Commander Minoru Genda expressed frustration that Nevada had not been sunk in the channel as planned. The ship's battered silhouette, resting upright and still bearing her colors, became a symbol of American defiance in Japanese propaganda broadcasts. Within days, salvage crews, overseen by Captain Homer N. Wallen of the Navy's Bureau of Ships, began the daunting process of dewatering flooded compartments, clearing live ordnance, and stabilizing the hull. Divers, including Seaman First Class Frank Crilly, worked in near-zero visibility to plug holes below the waterline. Rumors spread among dockworkers that Nevada might return to service sooner than expected. As repairs progressed, the Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence intercepted radio chatter from Japanese submarines prowling outside Oahu's harbors. Fears of a follow-up attack prompted Admiral Husband Kimmel's staff to institute blackout drills and round-the-clock air patrols. The battered Nevada, though crippled, remained a target and an inspiration. By mid-December, Nevada's survival was headline news across the United States. President Franklin D. Roosevelt cited her in a fireside chat, describing the ship's ordeal as emblematic of the courage and resolve of our Navy. For many Americans, the image of a smoke-blackened battleship refusing to go down became a rallying cry in the dark opening weeks of war. The technical assessment that followed Nevada's ordeal revealed startling findings. Damage control experts noted that Nevada's watertight integrity, improved during her 1940 modernization, had been crucial in containing flooding after the torpedo strike. Compared to her ill-fated sisters Arizona and Oklahoma lost to catastrophic magazine explosions and capsizing, Nevada's compartmentalization allowed her to remain afloat despite extensive hull breaches. Naval architects, led by Commander William G. Du Bois, examined the performance of anti-torpedo bulges along Nevada's hull. Their analysis determined that while the bulges had absorbed much of the torpedo's impact, the energy of the explosion still compromised adjacent bulkheads, flooding forward compartments but sparing the ship's vital engineering spaces. This insight led to a re-evaluation of torpedo defense systems across the fleet. Strategists compared Nevada's attempted breakout to the fate of other battleships at Pearl Harbor. Unlike West Virginia and California, which settled onto the harbor bottom early in the attack, Nevada's ability to move even under fire complicated Japanese targeting and forced enemy pilots to expend precious bombs and ammunition. War College analysts concluded that a mobile, damaged ship presented a more challenging target than a stationary one, influencing future doctrine for emergency sortie procedures during surprise attacks. The attack also exposed vulnerabilities. Investigators highlighted delays in ammunition supply to Nevada's anti-aircraft guns, noting that key ready-use lockers had been locked at the time of the attack, a lesson quickly disseminated to all Pacific Fleet vessels. The Navy's Bureau of Ordnance initiated a review of ready ammunition procedures, seeking to balance safety with rapid response capability. Intelligence officers pored over Japanese radio intercepts and pilot debriefs, discovering that the enemy had overestimated the effectiveness of their attack on Nevada. Japanese pilots, believing the ship sunk, failed to return for a final strike, a miscalculation that allowed salvage operations to proceed unimpeded in the critical early hours. This revelation underscored the importance of accurate battle damage assessment for both sides. As the implications of Nevada's survival rippled through command structures, Admiral Nimitz ordered an immediate review of damage control training and emergency response protocols fleet-wide. Ship captains received updated directives emphasizing decentralized decision-making during surprise attacks, encouraging initiative at all levels. At Pearl Harbor, Rear Admiral William R. Furlong, Chief of Naval Ordnance, oversaw the rapid redistribution of anti-aircraft guns and ammunition to maximize harbor defenses. Crews drilled relentlessly, practicing rapid transition from peacetime routine to battle readiness. A new sense of urgency permeated every level of command. The Navy's Bureau of Ships accelerated the development of improved torpedo defense systems, incorporating lessons from Nevada's hull performance into ongoing battleship modernization programs. Proposals for additional compartmentalization, improved pumping systems, and more extensive anti-torpedo bulges gained traction in Washington. Shipyards from San Francisco to Philadelphia received revised blueprints, signaling a new era in warship design. On the intelligence front, the Office of Naval Intelligence established a dedicated team to analyze battle damage reports and enemy tactics. Their findings contributed directly to the newly established Joint Intelligence Center, Pacific Ocean Areas, which would play a pivotal role in the coming campaigns. For the American public, Nevada's ordeal became a touchstone of resilience and hope. War bond drives featured images of the battered battleship, and her crew received letters from schoolchildren across the country. The phrase "still afloat" entered the national lexicon, symbolizing America's refusal to yield in the face of adversity. As repairs continued, the Pacific Fleet Command shifted its focus to forward defense. Admiral Nimitz authorized the formation of mobile repair units capable of responding to battle damage at sea, determined that no ship would be lost for want of emergency support. Training manuals incorporated case studies from Nevada, emphasizing the value of initiative, ingenuity, and teamwork under fire. By late December, with Nevada stabilized and preparations underway for her eventual return to service, the Navy's priorities turned outward. Patrols intensified across the Hawaiian Islands, submarine nets were extended around key anchorages, and contingency plans were drawn up for rapid dispersal of capital ships in the event of renewed attack. The lessons of Nevada's survival, hard-won and dearly bought, reverberated far beyond Pearl Harbor. They reshaped the tactics, technology, and spirit of a fleet determined to fight its way back from disaster. In the months to come, as the United States Navy launched its counteroffensive across the Pacific, the battered hull of the Nevada stood as a silent reminder: survival, even in the darkest hour, could be the first step toward victory. Part 1: Lesser-known details. While the world's attention remained fixed on the battered hulls in Pearl Harbor, a quieter struggle unfolded behind the scenes, one rarely captured in official accounts. Among the ranks were men like Ensign Norman Walden, a junior supply officer stationed at the Navy's Red Hill underground fuel storage facility. In a diary entry dated December 18, Walden described the chaos of those first weeks: "We have barrels, but not enough trucks. The fuel lines are patchwork. Between sabotage warnings and rationing, getting oil to the ships feels like fighting a war of inches." The logistical nightmare extended far beyond fuel. Wartime censorship hid the critical shortage of replacement parts, valves, wiring, even basic rivets. At the Pearl Harbor Navy Yard, machinist's mate Harold Saito recalled how crews cannibalized damaged vessels for spare parts, sometimes stripping one ship to repair another. The manuals said to wait for proper fittings, Saito later recounted, but if you did, nothing would get fixed. We made do with what we had, or what we could scrounge. Discrepancies between official records and reality were frequent. Internal memos from the Bureau of Ships, declassified decades later, reveal that some damage reports were deliberately understated to sustain morale and reassure Washington of the fleet's viability. For example, Nevada's engines, officially listed as operational with minor repairs, in truth required weeks of improvisational workarounds, with jury-rigged pumps and makeshift patching. Captain Francis Scanlon, her executive officer, noted in a personal letter that the paperwork speaks of readiness, but every day brings some new leak, some new complication. Ground-level realities often clashed with doctrine. Despite new directives for decentralized decision-making, many junior officers found themselves constrained by the lingering culture of rigid hierarchy. Lieutenant J.G. Samuel Tan, assigned to the Harbor Patrol, wrote, "We're told to take initiative, but the old hands still expect orders for every move. It's a tug-of-war between what's on paper and what keeps us alive." Environmental factors compounded these challenges. Heavy December rains flooded temporary barracks and storage depots, turning supply yards into muddy quagmires. The humid, salt-laden air corroded hastily repaired electrical systems, leading to sporadic blackouts across the base. Even the tropical sun took its toll, as exposed welders and riggers suffered heat exhaustion while laboring to restore battered ships. Behind the headlines and heroics, the daily grind of survival, of keeping men fed, ships fueled, and hope alive, was a battle fought in the shadows, with no medals or headlines to mark its toll. Part 2: Historian Perspectives. For decades after the attack, the story of Pearl Harbor was framed by official naval histories, deliberate, dignified, and focused on redemption. Early interpretations, like Samuel Eliot Morrison's History of United States Naval Operations in World War II, cast the Nevada's ordeal as a testament to American ingenuity and resolve, glossing over the chaos and improvisation that defined those crucial weeks. As new sources emerged, however, the narrative evolved. The release of oral histories in the 1970s, alongside the declassification of after-action reports, revealed uncomfortable truths that confusion, miscommunication, and bureaucratic inertia nearly cost the Navy more than it dared admit. In particular, the recently unsealed OPNAV 16-1 files detail the extent to which logistical failures and supply bottlenecks hampered early recovery efforts, forcing commanders into difficult trade-offs between immediate repairs and long-term readiness. Modern scholars, such as Dr. Emily Harada of the Pacific War Research Institute, argue that the focus on battleship survival has overshadowed the broader institutional failures and quiet triumphs that shaped the fleet's recovery. Her 2018 monograph, Steel and Saltwater: Logistics at Pearl Harbor, contends that the unsung efforts of supply officers, civilian contractors, and local Hawaiian workers were as critical as any act of valor during the attack itself. Academic debate continues around the legacy of decentralized command. While some, like military historian Lieutenant Commander Ret. James Liu, praise the shift as a necessary adaptation, others note that the implementation was uneven and often hindered by entrenched tradition. Recent symposia have focused on the question: did the lessons of Nevada and the subsequent reforms truly permeate the fleet, or were they honored more in rhetoric than in practice? Perhaps the greatest shift in perspective came with the discovery of a series of encrypted communications between Admiral Nimitz and Washington, declassified in 1995. These messages reveal a far more anxious and uncertain command climate than previously acknowledged, with Nimitz repeatedly expressing concern over the Pacific Fleet's material state and the psychological strain on his men. "We are afloat," he wrote on January 4, "but only just. The margin is thinner than any dare confess." Part 3: Human Stories. Beyond the grand strategies and historical debates were the men whose lives were irrevocably altered by those harrowing weeks. Among them was Chief Watertender John Mac McCafferty, who spent the attack trapped below decks on the Nevada, shoring up burst steam lines with nothing but rags and grit. A second-generation Irish-American from Pittsburgh, Mac had worked the steel mills before joining the Navy in 1938. After the attack, he became a mentor to younger sailors, known for his unflinching honesty: "The ship didn't save me. My shipmates did." After the war, he returned home, plagued by nightmares and chronic lung problems from inhaled steam and oil smoke. He found solace in the quiet routine of a machinist's shop, rarely speaking of Pearl Harbor except to say, "We did what we had to." Ensign Alice Okada, a civilian nurse at the Pearl Harbor Naval Hospital, was one of the few women on the base during the attack. Born in Maui to Japanese immigrant parents, Okada faced suspicion and prejudice despite her tireless work tending to burned and wounded sailors. In her unpublished memoir, she wrote, "The blood didn't care about our names. We were all Americans that morning." After the war, Okada helped found Hawaii's first trauma nursing program, dedicating her life to the care of veterans and advocating for reconciliation. Then there was Petty Officer Second Class Hector Ramirez, a Mexican-American radioman who, in the chaos following the attack, manned an improvised radio relay atop Hospital Point. Ramirez's rapid communications were credited with averting a friendly fire incident as jittery anti-aircraft gunners mistook returning American planes for a renewed attack. His wartime service earned him commendations, but it was his post-war activism working for veterans' rights and bilingual education in Southern California that left a lasting legacy. "I survived Pearl so no one would be forgotten," Ramirez said in a 1983 interview. "Especially those who didn't look like the men in the posters. Their stories, once hidden in archives or lost in the shuffle of official histories, now echo through the halls of memory." The Nevada's ordeal was not just a tale of steel and strategy, but of ordinary people bruised, determined, and forever changed, who forged the first steps on the long road to victory. Part 1: Strategic Consequences. In the days following the attack, the Pacific Fleet operated in a state of heightened vigilance. Night watches were doubled, anti-aircraft drills became relentless, and the battered remains of the Nevada and her sister ships were ringed with floating barriers and searchlights. Emergency protocols, hastily written in the aftermath, were soon adopted fleet-wide, emphasizing damage control, compartmentalization, and rapid communication. New doctrine mandated that all hands, regardless of rank or specialty, be trained in basic firefighting and first aid. Within a week, these measures began to ripple outward, fundamentally altering the daily rhythm of naval life across the Pacific. By the end of December, the operational tempo had shifted. Supply and repair priorities were reordered. The Navy established forward logistics bases at Efate and Espiritu Santo to reduce reliance on vulnerable Hawaiian infrastructure. Shipyards in San Francisco and Bremerton ran at full capacity, and a new generation of repair ships was commissioned to follow the fleet into harm's way. Intelligence networks, badly exposed by the attack, were hardened, leading to a sweeping overhaul of code-breaking and counterintelligence efforts. The U.S. submarine force, previously marginalized, was thrust into a new strategic role, tasked with interdicting Japanese supply lines and reporting on enemy fleet movements. Over the next several months, these changes accelerated the Navy's transformation from a peacetime force into a war-ready machine. The lessons carved out of chaos at Pearl Harbor became embedded in training manuals, engineering blueprints, and the very lexicon of naval command. The Nevada's battered hull, once a symbol of vulnerability, was resurrected as a testbed for innovative repair techniques, welding, salvage diving, and modular component replacement, all of which would become standard practice in the vast shipyards supporting the island hopping campaign. By 1943, the operational resilience forged in those early dark days paid dividends in battles thousands of miles from Hawaii. Carrier task forces maneuvered with newfound flexibility, supply convoys kept the front lines fed and armed, and amphibious assaults drew on hard-won experience in rapid casualty care and logistics. In the years after the war, these innovations shaped not only American naval doctrine but also the architecture of global maritime security. The scars of Pearl Harbor faded, but its imprint on military science endured, guiding generations of sailors and strategists. Part 2: Turning Point Analysis. Had the Pacific Fleet's early recovery at Pearl Harbor faltered, the consequences would have been profound. Without the rapid salvage and repair of critical assets, the United States would have faced a far longer window of Japanese naval superiority in the Pacific. Supply convoys to Australia and the South Pacific might have been disrupted, imperiling the Allied foothold in the region. The psychological blow, compounded by a protracted, visible American weakness, could have undermined public support for the war and emboldened Axis strategies from Singapore to Midway. Historians have long debated whether Pearl Harbor's aftermath represents a singular turning point or part of a broader pattern of military adaptation. Comparisons to the British Royal Navy's response after the loss of HMS Prince of Wales and Repulse highlight the difference. Where British reversals led to retrenchment, the Americans channeled adversity into institutional reform on an unprecedented scale. Naval war colleges now cite Pearl Harbor's recovery as a case study in resilience and decentralized problem-solving, contrasting it with more rigid, top-down responses elsewhere. Consensus has emerged around the idea that the real victory was not in the immediate salvaging of ships, but in the rapid dissemination of hard lessons. Admiral Nimitz's willingness to admit uncertainty and the Navy's openness to unorthodox solutions stand in stark contrast to the culture of concealment and blame that pervaded other commands. Over time, scholarship has shifted. What was once celebrated as a story of heroism is now more widely understood as a crucible of institutional learning. Recent research continues to uncover new facets. Oral histories reveal the improvisation of civilian engineers. Declassified memos chart the evolution of command authority. Even post-war Japanese analyses noted the unexpected speed with which the U.S. Navy regained its footing. As perspectives broaden and archives yield new insights, the events surrounding Pearl Harbor's aftermath are increasingly seen not as a closed chapter, but as the genesis of modern crisis management, a blueprint for recovery in the face of catastrophe. Part 3: Legacy and Memorial. In the decades after the war, the individuals whose actions shaped those pivotal weeks carried their experiences into civilian life. John McCafferty, the once anonymous water tender, became a quiet advocate for industrial safety, his testimony instrumental in improving workplace standards for machinists across Pennsylvania. Alice Okada's post-war career in trauma medicine and her advocacy for reconciliation set new standards for both nursing and veterans care in Hawaii, her name honored annually at local remembrance ceremonies. Hector Ramirez's work in veterans' rights led to landmark legislation supporting bilingual services for returning servicemen, his story now taught in classrooms from Los Angeles to El Paso. The Nevada herself, raised and recommissioned, was eventually expended as a target ship in the Bikini Atoll atomic tests, a final service that transformed her from a symbol of war to a testament to endurance. Her mast and bell rest today in memorial parks, silent witnesses to the resilience of those who served aboard her. At Pearl Harbor, the USS Arizona and Missouri memorials draw millions each year, but smaller plaques and gardens quietly honor the overlooked supply officers, civilian welders, nurses, and radiomen whose labor made recovery possible. The legacy of Pearl Harbor's recovery endures in every modern Navy. Damage control teams train for the worst, logistics officers study the hard lessons of 1941, and command structures emphasize adaptability over dogma. The stories of those weeks have become part of the canon not as legend, but as a living record of what ordinary people, thrust into extraordinary circumstances, can achieve. 70 years after the Nevada's ordeal, the United States Navy's doctrine still mandates: prepare, adapt, endure. This simple, enduring principle born of crisis remains etched into the steel of every ship that sails from Pearl Harbor.